Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions: who am I, and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. Today's episode is part of our conversation series. I'm just one voice in this relationship diversity movement, and it's important to bring more unique perspectives into the conversation. Today, I'm honored to be talking with Dr. Elisabeth Sheff about the evolution of relationship diversity from her over 25-year career. We also talk about her work with the Bonding Project, a project which will help you explore the bonding styles that you have. But first, a little about her. Dr. Elisabeth Eli Sheff is a researcher, expert witness, coach, speaker, and educational consultant. With a PhD in Sociology from the University of Colorado, Boulder, and certification as a Sexuality Educator, Dr. Sheff specializes in gender and sexual minority families, consensual non-monogamy, and kink BDSM. Sheff is the foremost academic expert on polyamorous families with children, and her 25-plus year Polyamorous Family Study is the only longitudinal study of polyfamilies with children to date. In addition to the more than 20 peer-reviewed journal articles and chapters Dr. Eli has written, she's also published 4 books and is working on more. Sheff's first book, The Polyamorous Next Door, details the findings of the first 15 years of her research on polyamorous families with children. Her second book, Stories from the Polycule, is an edited anthology of writings by polyamorous folks. When Someone You Love is Polyamorous is Sheff's shortest book that guides family members and significant others who are trying to understand a polyamorous loved one. Children in Polyamorous Families is Dr. Eli's newest book. It's a short summary of her findings on children to date. Sheff blogs for Psychology Today at the Polyamorous Next Door. In collaboration with 3 colleagues, Dr. Eli developed the Bonding Project, a test people can take to explore their preferred bonding styles. Let's get into the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Relationship Diversity Podcast, where I have a very special guest with me today. I'm very honored to welcome Dr. Elisabeth Sheff here. So welcome, Dr. Eli.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you here because I've already read your bio out, so everyone knows, the facts of who you are, but really your voice in the relationship diverse movement has been pivotal in not only in just speaking for this group, but also doing all of the research, or a lot of the research behind these diverse relationships, to support that there are many ways, infinite ways, that people can be in relationships. And so first, thank you for all of your work that you've done and continue to do. And I'd love to start with asking you how you got into studying polyamorous families, polyamory. What interested you about this type of relationship?
When I was 22, I met a man who told me on our first date that he never wanted to be monogamous and never wanted to get married. And I was like, whatever, I don't care. I thought I was going to be a lesbian, and pretty much was like, you're my boy toy of the moment until I get back to real relationships with women. You're disposable. dude. So whatever you want, I'm fine with me. I don't care.
Uh-huh.
Um, but then I fell in love with him and I was like, wait a minute here. What do
Mm.
you mean? No monogamy and no marriage. Like, I didn't know if that was what I wanted or not, but I couldn't imagine how to have like a long-term committed relationship without one or both of those. It just didn't,
Mm.
they seemed definitional
Mm.
of long-term committed relationships to me. And I was really scared of
Mm.
non-monogamy. Um, I think a lot of people who are monogamous leaning, when their partner says to them, I want multiple partners, what we hear is, you're not good enough.
Mhm.
So what I heard was, you're too fat, you're bad in bed, you're not enough.
Mm.
And he kept trying to tell me, no, that's not it. Like, it doesn't matter who he was with, he would always want multiple partners.
Mm.
And I was like, huh. So we talked about it for a long time. And then I heard about polyamory. We hadn't even known the word yet, because this was
Mm.
probably in the early 90s,
Mm.
I would say. Yeah, early 90s. Um, so then I heard this radio interview on National Public Radio with a woman who ran a local polyamory support group where we were.
Mm.
And she was talking about polyamory and talking about this event they were having. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what he's been talking about. And this is something I need to check out, because I can't tell if I actually don't want to do this because I don't want to do this,
Mm.
or if I'm afraid of this and don't want to do this because it's this kind of knee-jerk reaction of being raised in a monogamous society. I can't tell the
Mhm.
difference here. So we went to, it turned out to be a Loving More event, and Loving More was one of the first organizations that served polyamorous communities. They
Mm.
printed for the longest time a print magazine.
Oh.
It's gone now. It's very difficult to maintain
Mm.
a print magazine financially
Right.
now. Very difficult. But the organization still exists. They do really cool conferences and educational planning and
Mm.
advocacy. They're awesome. Um, so I went and met these folks, pretty much what I think of as a civilian, like
Mm.
thinking about, how does this impact my life, and not approaching as a researcher, but more like, I'm in love with someone who really wants to do this and it really bothers me a
Mhm.
lot. So how
Mhm.
do we manage this? And in that relationship, we made a lot of the kind of classic mistakes of the time.
Yeah.
My then partner, now ex-husband, um, really wanted me to find us another woman to
Mm.
join, basically a unicorn. He was a
Mhm.
unicorn hunter and he wanted me to use me as the bait for the
Mm.
unicorn. And I was not down. We never
Mhm.
did find our unicorn, but we did all like the weird things that unicorn hunters would do if we, like expecting this woman to fold into our lives. He really saw her potentially as a way to have more children, because I had had two kids. I was like, two is enough for me. I really can't handle myself some of the
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
much less more kids. Like
In there.
I'm
Yeah.
full up with the number of beings I can manage. And he was like, well, maybe she'll have the children and she'll take care of the kids while you work. And I don't know what he was doing, sitting on his kingly throne, being fanned by angels, maybe. I don't know. But he definitely wanted to be the center of attention.
Mm.
And when we finally, I very reluctantly tried it, men were approaching me and he was like, no, 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 this was never going to
Oh.
be about with you with multiple men. This was always going to be about him with multiple women. And I was like, you asshole, you
Yeah.
never said that, you were never clear about that. I don't know if he thought it but never told me, or he thought he could handle any kind of polyamory, but as soon
Mm,
as men were interested in me, he was like, wow, I can't handle that, or I don't know.
mm, mhm.
But it destroyed our relationship, and I left him 5 of the longest years of my life later, after he kind of, I was so resistant to polyamory and he pushed and pushed and pushed for it. And then when I finally give in and it's not him as the center of attention, he wants
Mm.
to pull the plug. I was
Wow.
livid.
Yeah.
I was irate.
Yeah.
And ironically, that happens. It's kind of cliche. It happens more
Mhm.
than more often than not when a man kind of drags a woman to the polyamorous community kicking and screaming. Then she's like, wow, I have all these options, this is fun. And he's like, oh shit, I didn't
Mhm.
realize it would be harder to find women to date me.
Mm. Yeah.
Now I don't want to do this anymore.
Mm. Yep, yep. I always say that I think polyamory mainly works if both people are willing to look at their own shit. If
Oh yeah,
they're not, well, it will never work because it just highlights everything that is wounded within you.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. So you got through that relationship, and then was that around the time you started doing your research?
Actually, the group that I had met, where I was like, I need to figure this out.
Hmm.
I was in graduate school by that time
Hmm.
and taking a course on ethnography with the esteemed Dr. Patricia Adler, who
Mm.
is a giant in her field.
Mm.
Um, and she was like, find a setting and ask people some questions. And I was like, oh, I'm hanging out with these really interesting people already. Maybe I'll ask them. And that just kind of slowly evolved into my dissertation
Wow.
research of asking them first and then asking people who they knew. And that was in the Midwest in a
Hmm.
very white place. So at one point I was like, everybody in this sample, almost everyone is white. This isn't great. I
Mm-hmm.
need to see if I can diversify. So I went to the California Bay Area, where I happen to be right
Mm.
now, um, looking for people. And this was in the early 2000s,
Okay.
looking for people to interview, and found a whole bunch of white people doing it, still. And I've realized that not that only white people are in polyamorous relationships, certainly not anymore, and not even at that
Hmm.
time. But if you're going to talk to a white researcher about your unusual relationship,
Mm.
that requires a lot of safety, a
Right.
lot of social privilege to buffer you,
Hmm.
not only from the potential impacts of being found out in the community, somehow being outed, which I've never outed anyone in my research,
Hmm.
but there's that risk.
Hmm.
It's risky to potentially single yourself out that way. And then the added risk of having this white researcher look down on you, which I don't, but how do they
Right.
know that?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I think there are lots of reasons why now we're having a lot more research on BIPOC folks done by BIPOC folks, which I think is the key. That's really
Definitely.
ideal.
To create that sense of safety and, ability to open up it's very scary to, talk about. It's one of the reasons why I felt like I had to do this podcast was because I have so much white privilege, and not only privilege in terms of, where I live and, what I do for a living. And I'm an entrepreneur, but also just in the acceptance that I had with my family, my children. I mean, it was like everyone was accepting and open and loving and like, you do you, you've always done you, so you do you. And it was like, I have to speak out for people who cannot speak out. um and so I'm curious about, because you have studied, this like diversity in relationship for over 25 years, what you are seeing as the evolution of diverse relationships. from the time that you started up to now, and then I want to like get that and then look maybe into the future if you were to, future cast a little bit. But I'm curious what you've seen in the evolution of diverse relationships.
I'll start just within polyamory itself.
Mm-hmm.
I would say lots of subdivisions coming up within polyamory
Mm-hmm.
now that weren't necessarily there. Initially, there was this discussion of either polyamory or polyfidelity.
Mm. What is the
And
difference? Can you talk about just the difference of the two?
polyamory is a more open form of relationship where people are dating each other, but there's also the assumption that they would be able to date other people as well. It's not necessarily like, all right, we've got the 3 or 4 of us and now we're done. But
Mm-hmm.
more like, yeah, there's the 3 or 4 of us and we might meet someone else, individually, as a group, whatever. It's kind of more permeable.
Mm-hmm.
Polyfidelity is the idea that it's a closed relationship among more than 2 people. And usually it's a smaller group, 3 to 5
Okay.
is generally the kind of closed nugget of polyamory.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's most common in triads and quads.
Mm-hmm.
And it works great for some people, especially people who kind of accidentally fell for each other, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe weren't looking for polyamorous relationships. But I'm thinking actually of this triad that was in my research, a couple with their best friend, and they just kind of all accidentally fell in love. And it was
Mm-hmm.
so cute because especially at the time when people would get into these multiple partner relationships without looking for them and without a community to kind of organize it, they would always think they invented it. And it was so cute because they're like, we invented this new thing. And then they go online, then the internet comes and they go online and they're like, oh, we
Right.
invented it. They invented it. They invented it. Like a
Uh-huh.
lot of people have invented this new thing. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Um, and in that case, like they loved each other, but weren't really looking for
Mm-hmm.
additional relationships. So they learned the term polyfidelity and applied it to themselves of like, yeah, it's just us. We're not really polyamorous in the sense that we're out there on dating websites and things like that. When it doesn't work, polyfidelity is when someone imposes it out of insecurity and someone
Mm.
else in the group actually wants to be able to date, but they give in because someone within the group is like, I think it should just be the 4 of us. I really don't think we should be dating other people because of sexually transmitted infections or time
Mm-hmm.
or emotion. Like, this is as much as I can handle or whatever. There's usually reasons behind it. And then that person who's ever in that group who gave in to polyfidelity but doesn't really want it will often see other people clandestinely and so
Mm.
cheat within
Right.
their polyfidelitous relationship. It doesn't always happen that way, but if
Mm-hmm.
there's cheating in a polyamorous relationship, frequently it's happening in a polyfidelitous relationship
Okay.
where they've
Uh,
said, this is as big as we get. This is us. Don't see people outside of us.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you started the research, you started seeing kind of that discussion, polyamory versus polyfidelity. And then how did it evolve from there?
Um, I can't remember exactly when I heard the term solo polyamory,
Mm-hmm.
but they started to talk about, oh, there's solo polyamory, there's monogamish
Mm-hmm.
relationships, there's non-hierarchical polyamory,
Mm-hmm.
there's kitchen table polyamory, there's hierarchical polyamory. And like within polyamory, they started to identify kind of subcategories, which is, I have to say, very common among sex and gender minorities. That
Mm.
first you've got the one category, and then you realize, oh, we're not all homogeneous in here.
Mm-hmm.
There's different kinds of us. And then you
Mm-hmm.
start kind of sub identifying.
Right.
Then relationship anarchy came a little bit later. So now there's all kinds of relationships that could be called polyamory, and
Mm-hmm.
many of them are called a kind of polyamory, but some of them are not called polyamory at all.
Mm.
And really kind of like relationship anarchy and monogamish relationships,
Mm-hmm.
those two can look like polyamory depending on who's doing them and how, or they can look super different.
Mm-hmm.
Like both of those especially can be really kind of idiosyncratic to however the people who are doing it negotiate it, which is very similar to polyamory,
Mm-hmm.
actually,
Mm-hmm.
frequently idiosyncratic to the people doing it. So that kind of proliferation of sub identities within the larger category is definitely a trend I have
Mm-hmm.
seen, and a kind of judgment against each other. Like some people kind of staking their flag on their own category and saying, this is the real one. We're the right,
Right.
we do it the right way, and you're wrong. You may
Mm-hmm.
do your thing, but it's not nearly as good as our thing. So lots of,
Yeah.
especially around hierarchy, some people being like, hierarchy is not okay under any circumstances,
Mm.
which for
Mm-hmm.
them, maybe it's not. For them,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they
Mm-hmm.
need complete non hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, they're more comfortable with hierarchy, and the people they're dating are also comfortable with hierarchy, and it
Right.
works for them. And
Right.
ironically, new research on the non hierarchy people, no matter how much they say no hierarchy, when you look at precisely how they spend their time and their money,
Mm.
they have clear hierarchy.
Uh,
They
mm-hmm.
pretend no hierarchy, but they do
Uh-huh.
have hierarchy. So
It's almost
there,
like
I
a
guess there's
natural, like human thing that happens, right?
humans definitely are all about the hierarchy. If you look
Mm-hmm.
at human relationships across
Mm-hmm.
time and around the world,
Mm-hmm.
even small like group relationships on the playground,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like somebody filters to the top with their
Right.
henchmen and
Mm-hmm.
dominates people below them.
Mm-hmm.
And it also happens within like sports teams
Mm-hmm.
or choirs
Mm-hmm.
or work groups, or like it's a thing. We're primates and it's what the primates do.
Right.
So pretending you're not a primate doesn't actually make you not a primate.
Right. Right. And I want to speak a little bit more to what you were saying about how everyone does it their way. And so I talk about how labels can be helpful to help us feel like we're not alone, but they can be really hurtful when they put us against each other. And my whole message with this podcast is that every relationship is as unique as you are. And that even like when I was in monogamy, right? When I was monogamous, is like, I'm not doing monogamy right. Like, what does that mean? Right. It's just that I'm not doing it how maybe I read or I saw or I witnessed other people doing it. When I threw that away, really threw it away. And I was like, well, how do I do it? And I'm in a unique relationship with my husband, who is a unique person, and our kids are unique. There's no other anyone else like us with our circumstances. And going into like my relationship in that way really freed me up to honor my own unique desires and wants, my partners, and have us. The work was us coming together to say, how are we going to express ourselves in this unique way? And that's how I talk about relationship diversity. It's not just diversity within these structures of monogamy, polyamory, and, non-monogamy, swinging and all of that. It's like, who am I? And how am I going to feel the most fulfilled in my life? And when I allow myself to do that, I also release the need for other people to show up in a certain way, to make it seem like everyone's doing it right or wrong. It's like it's more unifying. Um, and so that's why I think from some of the things I've read, you talk about that kind of thing of like, we all do it in our own way. And let's honor how we all do it and say, you can do it in your way because that's important to you, but you're not me and I'm not you. So
Right.
But it's about that consensual part of like coming together with my partner and saying, what do you need? What do you want to feel needed, special, and what's important to you? And let's come together in that way. So I get nervous, or not nervous, but I get sad when I see like people say, but I think it's like in society, like I'm supposed to do things in a certain way. I need to, if I'm not doing it in that certain way, I'm doing it wrong. Do you find that with people?
So much. And in fact, so one of the other areas that I started studying specifically because of polyamory is BDSM.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I'd never heard of it before,
Mm-hmm.
but so many of my polyamorous respondents were like, oh yeah, I'm kinky, or I do BDSM, or I've got this
Mm-hmm.
partner and this, like multiple partners within a BDSM context. And I was like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I started studying it. I was like, oh, this is clearly related. And I've
Mm-hmm.
never even heard of this. What is this? And that kind of we do it right is very strong within the BDSM community.
Mm-hmm.
And so much like the way polyamory has all sorts of different ways to practice it underneath, BDSM is very similar in that way. And just for listeners who've never heard of that
Mm-hmm.
either, it's kind of an acronym that means kinky sex. So there's bondage and discipline,
Mm-hmm.
dominance and submission,
Mm-hmm.
and sadism and masochism.
Mm-hmm.
And it often involves like role play and intense sensations. Sometimes, tying people up and spanking them is really popular, or hitting them with other things. That's called impact play.
Mm-hmm.
And pretending someone's in charge, and then
Mm-hmm.
pretending someone else is submissive to them, but
Mm-hmm.
something important about BDSM is that it's negotiated and consensual. It's not just people like walking up to other people in the
Right.
grocery store and slapping them or something.
Right.
That's assault.
Right.
This is clearly negotiated with, like, if the submissive partner will tell the dominant partner what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. They
Mm-hmm.
generally will have a safe word
Mm-hmm.
to stop things if there's somebody's feeling uncomfortable. So, and there's a lot more to it than that, but that's
Mm-hmm.
just like the glaze on top. Um, so within BDSM, there's definitely this kind of older generation that follows what they call protocol,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very clear set of rules and regulations around how the submissive deals with the dominant, and
Mm-hmm.
a certain like number of paces behind that they walk, and that the dominant always sits higher than the submissive. So if there's only one chair, the dominant sits in the chair and the submissive sit on the ground. And
Mm-hmm.
like all of these rules that people made up.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want to make up no rules at all. Other people really like the rules, and it's fun to play with rules, and fun to occasionally break rules and be
Right.
punished. Uh,
Right.
but there's definitely that similar sense of who's the real kinkster. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you don't do it the way someone else does it, then you are pretending or something. And that became really highlighted with the advent of what they call the switch,
Mm.
because initially there were dominant people and submissive people, and you
Mm-hmm.
chose a role and you stuck with it, like it defined you.
Mm-hmm.
As younger people came into the scene, they refused to stay
Mm.
in one role. Not every single one of them,
Mm-hmm.
but many of them
Mm-hmm.
were like, you know what, we're here to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
This is fun. And you're
Mm-hmm.
taking yourselves very seriously with all of these rules,
Right.
but that we don't want those rules. So a lot of people kind of rejected the mandate that you have to choose dominance or submission, and would choose, one or the other depending on their mood, or
Mm-hmm.
depending on who they were playing with, or what kind of play they
Mm-hmm.
were doing. And so that was kind of a revolution in the kink generational. And now it's a big nothing. There are so many switches, and it's kind of nobody really cares anymore. Like you can call yourself a switch and not get people saying, oh, well, then you're not really kinky or you don't
Mhm.
really count. You're not, you're doing it the wrong way.
Right. This is what I see is the gift of, millennials, Gen Zers, Gen Alphas in terms of fluidity. So I did a whole episode on fluidity just watching because I'm about to turn 53, but I have Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids. I had kids later in life, but I have nieces and nephews who are millennials. So I just like watched this amazing, beautiful, in my eyes, transformation of we have to fit in a box in like baby boomers and Gen Xers, and then moving more towards fluidity, which is why I think there's all these, beautiful different ways that people are expressing identity and relationship style is because we're moving from, this like I am a certain person to I flow. And today I feel like this. And tomorrow I feel like that. And I want to be able to express all sides of myself. So with that, I ask you, what do you see as in like if you were to forecast the next, 10, 15 years of relationship diversity, how do you see that playing out?
That's a great question. I think I see monogamy being more firmly settled as one of the options on the menu of diverse relationships. I
Mm-hmm.
don't see monogamy as ever going away,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's lost its throne of the unquestioned norm. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even among people who want to practice monogamy, now it's got to be negotiated. You can't just assume, oh, we had sex that one time, so we're together, and together means monogamous. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
laugh. Exactly. If you assume that, you
Right.
look like a fool because
Uh-huh.
you can have a lot of sex with a lot of different people and not be with
Mm-hmm.
any of them, and certainly not be monogamous with any of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a certain appeal within monogamy that a lot of people really like and really want to stick with, but it's not the unquestioned only option
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And I don't see it ever going back to the
Wow.
sole option,
Mhm.
unquestioned anymore.
Wow.
Because even if you want to practice monogamy, now you have to decide, does your monogamy include sexting other people?
Mm-hmm.
Like people never had to think about sexting and
Mm-hmm.
how that influenced monogamy because there was no texting to
Right.
sex. There was no Facebook on which to send your ex
Mm-hmm.
a flower and a heart emoji on their birthday. Let's say you never see them, you never like really hang out with them. But if you're sending them Facebook emojis like that, an
Mm-hmm.
eggplant Facebook emoji, is that monogamy?
Right.
Once you have to kind of pick apart what counts as monogamy and what doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely exposed as a social construct, not something that's like this natural thing that everyone does.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're like, well, is this part of it or not? Then you really have to decide what
Mm-hmm.
what do we mean by monogamy? And for
Yeah.
some people, that includes getting anonymous blowjobs.
Mm-hmm.
Can
Mm-hmm.
still be monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I definitely see monogamy as a strong choice, but not the only choice. And I think this emphasis on sex as the kind of hallmark of a real relationship is waning, in
Mm.
part because I think a lot of younger people are like, sex, eh, okay. Some of them are like, yeah, sex.
Mm-hmm.
I like sex. I want more sex. I want to have a lot of sex and go them. And some of
Yeah.
them are like, sex is kind of overrated. And that, like you have to think about it a lot. You got to get ready for it. You got to talk about it. And you got to, you know,
Right.
I'll wait and have sex later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think there's a lot of people who are recognizing that asexuality is this very legitimate,
Mm-hmm.
long-standing
Mm-hmm.
identity, that there have always been asexual people,
Mm-hmm.
but they've been kind of miscategorized as either frigid and kind of malfunctioning somehow, or superhuman, able to maintain celibacy as a priest or a nun or a whatever, someone
Uh-huh.
who's supposed to not have sex. And oh, that must be so difficult for them. And they're actually like, no, I chose this, so I wouldn't have to have sex. That's why
Right.
I'm doing this. Um,
Right.
and I think that entire kind of category of, you can be close to people, you can be, they can be important in your life, you can be important in their life, and it doesn't have to include sex. Like, sex doesn't mean it's a real relationship, and the absence of sex doesn't make it a not real
Right. Yeah.
relationship. I think is really, it's already here, it's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's still some holdouts who are like, oh, if you're asexual, there's something wrong with you. And I think that is going away. People are
Mm-hmm.
fully, especially again, younger people are fully accepting that you can be asexual and fully functional, not pathologized at all. There's nothing wrong with you. You just don't want to have sex, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yes, and I find that that's a misconception of polyamory, is that it's all about the sex. And
Right.
polyamory is so much about like emotional intimacy. Well, okay, I would say for me, emotional intimacy and just so many other areas besides just sex. And I think it's, that leads me to the thought of like it's about education. It's about really understanding and getting past all of those kind of societal, beliefs about and questioning. That's like a huge thing that I'm a big proponent of. Just like question and like go one layer deeper. Like, I have some, a lot of people are like, I could never be polyamorous. I'd be too jealous. And I'm like, why are you stopping there? Like, you are missing the gold of all of the healing that can happen because you stop at this one level here, and just asking why and looking at, can I have intimacy, emotional intimacy with more than one person? I already do. I have emotional intimacy with my children. I have it with my siblings. I have it with my, best friends. So, but there's just so many of these constructs, right, that are on relationships and gender and all of that. Um, and I would love to move to um, your work with the bonding project, because when I can't believe I just recently found out about the bonding project, but I love this project. So can you explain what it is, how it started, and where it's at now?
Absolutely. So my good friend Jess was talking about how she goes on all of these Tinder dates,
Mm,
and all of them say, oh, I don't want a relationship. And she's like, yeah, I know, I don't want a relationship either, but do you not want a relationship in the same kind of way that I don't want a relationship? That means
mm,
we kind of want a relationship, the
mm-hmm,
same kind.
mm-hmm,
But do you just not want someone with all these expectations of you? Like, what is it about the relationship that you don't want? And underneath that, what do you want?
mm-hmm,
So she was like, we need some kind of litmus test or whatever to figure out what people are looking for in a relationship. So she and I was like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. So we worked on that for maybe 5 years, of having like all these fantastic ideas, and it never went anywhere because we were both like idea oriented, but really had no clue about implementation. Then the pandemic strikes, and some of her friends and colleagues are not working the same way they used to be working. So she's like, hey, what do you think of adding some people to the team and see if we can actually make some forward momentum? So we added two more folks, and it changed everything.
oh,
Within a year, we had a quiz online
mm,
that was great. And a lot of people had really good responses to it, but we knew it was never going to be the final thing. We knew it was our beta
mm-hmm,
product, kind of. Um, for one thing, some of the language was difficult. Some of the wording was just really awkward and not great.
Mm.
And we tried to fix it, and it just was challenging. For another thing, it kind of lumped too many kinds of bonding into one quiz and didn't
Mm.
distinguish enough. So that was online for, I think, about a year and a half, and maybe close to 18,000 people took it and found
Mm.
that it was
Wow.
really useful. We got some great results. We got some great feedback. And we would have left it up while we kept working on the other quizzes. But when we created we basically like took a whole bunch of different programs and taped them together with duct tape and some chewing gum and a little bit of string. And so the back of the house, when people would come to take the quiz, if more than like 5 people took it in a day, the back of the house was just like crumble. And so we kept tried to fix that. And we were like, all right, this technological system just cannot handle this amount of traffic.
Mm.
We can't fix it. It's a hot mess. So
Mm.
we took the technology down, and now it's still up at bondingproject.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can find the quiz and take it as a self-score, kind
Mm.
of just to think about for yourself. What do you think about bonding? But now we're working on sub-quizzes
Mm.
around how do you want to bond around time? How do you want to bond around money? How about sex? How about
Mm.
affection and attention? How about cohabitation, like your
Mm.
space? To help people. So now there's room, for instance, let's say you're asexual, but you really like a group housing situation.
Mm.
You might be a solo bonder sexually, meaning you just don't necessarily even want to have sex with other people at all,
Mm-hmm.
but a many to many
Mm.
bonder in a housing situation where you like to live with people and you like that kind of collective feeling of everyone cooking together and keeping the house clean and making
Mm.
decisions together and kind of hanging out together with roommates,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't necessarily fall in love with them, want to have sex with them, whatever, maybe that's not the kind of bonding you're doing with them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really excited about not only how hopefully these new quizzes will help people figure out better how they want to bond, but it's also providing a lot of data that
Mm-hmm.
we are hoping to use and kind of provide to other researchers, policy making boards that can look and see, oh, how many people actually, of what age category, of what gender, of what, national origin, whatever, um, are actually bonding one to one, how many people want to bond one to many, many
Mm.
to many, how many solo bonders
Mm.
are out there. And what does solo bonding mean to them? Because
Mm-hmm.
solos actually really can run the gamut from like super solo hermit kind of person who's basically like, I really like to be left alone. I want to
Mm-hmm.
live by myself. I want my own finances. I don't want to have sex with anybody. Sure, I'll have friends and stuff. Maybe I'm a one to one or one to many bonder in a social setting, but for the most part, like I like my own space and I like my own time. That can be
Mm-hmm.
solo, or solo can also be I want to live in a group house and have all sorts of different lovers wherever, but I don't want any of my lovers trying to share my bank account,
Mm-hmm.
trying to share, custody of my child or whatever, who knows.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to kind of see more about solo. Seems like a really rich and evolving category right now.
Yeah, I love that. And the thing that sticks out to me so much as I hear you explain it is that it helps people get to know themselves and have conversations from a conscious place instead of like just going into something blindly and coming up with like, oh, because I really like my alone time. I process is just been that way since I was 12 years old. I process by myself. I need that alone time, even though I'm in, relationships, have kids, am rarely alone, but through deep soul searching, I found that if I don't have my alone time, I am not as good of a mom, partner, community member, business owner, whatever. And so it sounds like this will really help people get to know themselves so that they can then express that to the people around them in whatever type of relationship they are, in with those people. So that sounds just so opening and such an amazing step in the direction of conscious relationships.
And hopefully, once we get our vision for the technology, if we can actually implement this, it would be fantastic. Having a dashboard where people can see that the results of all of their quizzes and how that changes over time. Because back to fluidity, like you were saying, at some points in your life, you're like, I want to be with all the people. I want to be with all the people all the time. And at other points, you're like, I just want to be alone, me and the cat and nobody else. And then not only see your own results over time, but compare your results with other people. So let's say you're establishing a polycule and you've got 6 people and you're like, okay, how are we going to mesh as a polycule? You all take the tests. You do the relationship comparison, which is, again, a technology thing that would compare the results and find out, of the 6 of us, 4 of us want blended finances and 2 of us want to have their own money. How are we going to work that out?
Yes.
5 of us want to have kids and 1 of us really doesn't. 3 of us want to live together and 3 of us don't,
right.
So we can help highlight, okay, you're in strong agreement here and you probably won't have to work that much on that. But in this area or these areas, you have wildly differing desires around bonding, and that could create some issues. So let's look at that now in a kind of a more abstract way. Before it's like, you're pregnant. What do you mean you're pregnant?
Right.
You're what?
Right. Right. Gosh, that's so amazing. And I love the idea that you're saying that you can kind of look for the, get like a litmus test of like, where am I in this moment? And then where am I here? Because I do think, with my husband, we've been together 17 years and so much has changed, and so we have to continually come back to where are we now? What's going on with us now? And where are we not in alignment? Where are we in alignment? What do we need to be working on? What, to remain in whatever we're choosing to, relationship we're remaining to be in. But that's really amazing. So can people how can people, like, what are the varying ways that people can be a part of this bonding project?
Well, right now we're kind of in creative hiatus. I kind of picture us as like all of the bonding project people in a cocoon together, and we're in there working away, like coming up with something. And pretty soon, our new butterfly is gonna, like burst out, and we'll be back online again with multiple quizzes in a multiple way. But we've got to figure out, like, the scoring is a challenge, and how to house it technologically in a much more substantial way than we did last time. That is around money. Like, we've been just putting our own money into this, but to do the real build the technology in a robust and usable way is going to take more money than we have. So we're trying to figure out, like, okay, what do we do about the money? What do we do about so I am hoping that we will have solid quizzes to pilot test by the end of the spring or the summer, because we're pretty close to that, I think. So if people are interested in pilot testing and giving us that's a kind of a research process where you come up with a thing. In our case, it would be a quiz, and then people take it and they say, I liked this part. I didn't like that part. I found this confusing. I think you should add this. You didn't ask me about that. So pilot testing is a crucial step in research of creating your final product. So if people want to pilot test, they can connect with us online at bondingproject.com and volunteer to
Awesome.
pilot test. Where once we've kind of got our shit together again, we'll want interns to help us with
Mm-hmm.
things. And people, if you want to just take the quizzes and not have it be anything more than that, something you think about, you can go there right now and
Mm.
find the self-scoring, the old quiz.
Mm-hmm.
Just come with some grace that we know some of the wording is difficult. Um, and we know it lumps bonding styles together. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's still a useful thing to consider and talk about, but it's not as sophisticated as the quizzes we're coming out with soon.
Right. And it's a creative process. So
It
it
is a
will evolve.
creative
Yeah,
process.
it will evolve. And if you've got a lot of money and you're listening out there and this feels really true to you, let's support this bonding project, because I really do feel that this, exploring diversity in relationships and really learning about yourself and taking responsibility for your stuff and coming consciously into relationships is one way that we heal the divisiveness of what's going on in the world today. Um,
Agree.
yeah, yeah. So we'll have all of the links. Where can people connect with you, Dr. Eli?
My website is elisabethsheff.com, ELISABETHSHEFF.
Okay.
And there's all sorts of good links on there. You can find me on Psychology Today.
Mm,
I blog under the title of my first book, The Polyamorists Next
mhm.
Door. Those are probably the two best places.
I love your blog on Psychology Today. I read many of them. That's how I reached out to you. Well, that was one of it in a Facebook post, but I love that, just your perspectives on that. And so please go connect with Dr. Eli and support the Bonding Project. And we'll have all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Eli, for being a part of this
My pleasure.
and having
Thanks
this
so much for having
conversation.
me.
Thanks so much for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslaw.com, Instagram, or TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are. Are you feeling stuck or unfulfilled in your intimate relationship? Do all your relationships end in the same way? Do you feel like you've lost the spark in your current relationship? Can you never even find one person who you want to explore a relationship with? If you answered yes to any of those questions, are sick and tired of feeling like a failure in your relationships, and desperately desire a different experience, then my 8-week deep reprogramming intensive may be the answer for you. In this program, I work individually with you for 8 transformative weeks. We'll identify the subconscious programming that's keeping you stuck and shift it to a new affirming belief systems. We go deep, we get real, we get results. This is healing unlike anything you've ever experienced before. Here's what people are saying. Jordan from North Carolina said, more has shifted in 8 weeks of working with Carrie than 10 years of psychotherapy. Jane from Sanford, North Carolina said, it's honestly changed my life. And Cassie from Santa Barbara, California said, Carrie's laser precision in helping me diagnose where the stuck energy was helped me make positive movement in our first session alone. Absolutely transformational. I love being a guide and witness to these courageous people who claim that they were done with their past experiences and ready for something different. I'm opening a limited number of spots for 2023 and would love to help you permanently transform your relationship experience. To set up a free 30-minute clarity call where I'll help you uncover your number one block to fulfilling relationships, connect with me through the link in the show notes. You are worthy of experiencing deep fulfillment and love in your relationships. This intensive work will help you get there.